our minister had to leave early for the cabinet meeting, so we'll be putting him in the first, and then we'll be continuing with the other participants. Let's get start. I think the topic, Nepal as a federal state, lesson learned from the ministry is very important. It's particularly very important at this particular time when Nepal is struggling to have different states, different provinces in Nepal. As we all know that Nepal has to struggle a lot for this federalism. The idea was first floated probably by the Maoists, which was guaranteed by the Madhesi Andolan, and the political parties are still struggling for it. Probably it was the reason why CA1 and CA2 could not deliver the constitution. I think federalism is a very puzzling subject because the political parties are still puzzled with the numbers from 14 to 6 to 5, and there are a few parties who even don't want federalism. So I think we should be talking on this a lot, especially today. And there are certain things that we need to be very careful while restructuring the federal structure, because federalism is not only having different provinces, but sharing of power, sharing of resources, and there are different models for it. The political parties of Nepal are still not able to guarantee or not able to agree on the model, whether you have ethnic federalism or geographic or mixed or other forms of federalism. And to talk on this, we have two eminent speakers from India who will share their experience, how they have been dealing with the federalism, because I think federalism is an evolving process, and India in the last 6 decades has been struggling to it. If you look at the number of states in the beginning, it's like it has been increased multiple times. And in fact, there are multiple research done on this topic. If you look at the work of Professor Balveer Arora from JNU, which is excellent work where he has talked how federalism has evolved in India and what India should learn and unlearn. He has done extensive research on that. There are other professors like Mahendra Singh who has also worked on similar topics. And this process has been evolving even in India. Like if you look at recent Telangana movement, it's like division of Andhra Pradesh. So it's a form of, that is how India has been struggling to it. Jharkhand, Uttarakhand, Chhattisgarh, these are all new formed states in India. Even Delhi is trying to ask for full state status, which is a struggle in the process of federalism. So to talk on all these issues, we have a eminent speaker, and all of you are aware of them. All of you know them because they are they have worked with Nepal since decades, and at least a crowd like this doesn't need the introduction. So without delay, let's start with the program. First of all, I'd like to request the CEO of AITI, Mr. Singh, to give welcome remarks.
Good afternoon, the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Prakash Singh, joining with us from various diplomatic missions, international organizations, business house, and the civil societies and the universities. IDA is very much pleased to welcome in the Himalayas Forum with the aim of stimulating and facilitating conducive and substantive discussion on Asia's human safety related matters, widely understood in order to comprise issues such as strategy and defense, economy and trade, organized crime and terrorism, public health and environment, energy, water, natural resources, education, culture, civil society organizing this event in Nepal. In the aftermath of the return democracy to Nepal in the late 2000 years and the abolition of the monarchy, regional decentralization, federalism has become a continuous topic of the political debate at the national level in Nepal and in international arena these days. Nepal is economically, politically, socially, and culturally highly connected with the India and influenced by the India, the neighboring country. The India has more than half a century experience in federalism. India being the closest and nearest neighbor of Nepal, it has got wonderful opportunity to learn from the experience of India. If we talk about the contemporary issues in Nepal, federalism has become one of the major issues lately. IDA has always provided a platform to discuss the current affairs of Nepal, which could aid in the problem-solving approach in policy and government level. I hope this program will provide opportunity to understand India's federal system and what could be done in Nepal from our distinguished speakers from India and from Nepal. I hope and I encourage all of you to ask the genuine question after the keynote address from our speakers. Thank you so much.
Speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me an immense pleasure to be speaking about Nepal's ongoing experience in federalization among this august gathering. The issue of federal division is a new experience for us. We can learn from experience from our neighbor, India, in this regard. Even after 60 years, India's federal division is still work in progress. That shows that we too should be prepared for a similar journey. The current disputes and debates over federal demarcation therefore is natural. We will have to work together, experience the ups and downs, and continue to define federalism so that it serves the people in best possible manner. In this account, let me briefly tell you how we have come to this point in the federalization process. After the popular movements where people expressed their desire and aspiration to adopt federalism to replace the unitary system in place, the job was assigned to the first elected Constituent Assembly. There were 11 thematic committees in the first CA. One of them was the Committee on Restructuring of State and Division of State Powers. It recommended 14 province model. Subsequently, State Restructuring Commission was also formed, which recommended 10 and 8 province models. However, there could be no political consensus on these models, and the first CA got dissolved primarily because of this dispute over state restructuring. The second CA was elected in 2013. It formed 5 thematic committees and started working on the reports prepared by the first CA. Again, the disputes over the nature and number of federal provinces surfaced. Finally, the 4 major political parties decided to adopt 8 province model by reaching 16-point agreement 2 months ago. The parties decided to leave the matter of demarcation of province to the expert committee, that is to say, Federal Commission. Following the 16-point agreement, the first draft of the Constitution was prepared and was taken for public opinion collection. During the public opinion collection, many people suggested that the provinces should be demarcated right away by reducing the number of provinces and making them inclusive. There were similar demands from a number of dissatisfied parties. As a result, the major parties then restarted discussions to incorporate suggestions of the people. On August 8, the parties reached another agreement to form 6 provinces along with demarcation. This is the first time there was an agreement on provinces along with their borders. Naturally, there was a lot of reaction on this model. Many people have supported it and some have opposed it. The main issue of federal demarcation is not yet final. It will be refined and reviewed periodically. Party leaders have already publicly declared that they are willing to review it. In the current draft of the Constitution, there are 3 tiers of state structure: the central or federal level, province level, and local level. At the grassroots, there will be local governments in terms of municipalities, district assembly, and village palika. The city and village units will have both legislative and executive arms. The election in these units will be held in such a manner to ensure that women, Dalits, marginalized, and disadvantaged communities will get proportional inclusion. All of these have been designed in order to make state services easily and effectively available to the people at their doorsteps, to promote local democratic governance, to promote ownership and accountability, and to promote development from local level. The Constitution draft also mentions there can be special structures formed by law to address the concern of underprivileged region or community. The rights and responsibilities of federal units, provinces and local units are clearly mentioned in the schedules of the Constitution. We hope that these structures will be able to address the issues of maximum number of people. It will truly promote the unity in diversity and put Nepal on a path toward economic prosperity. The discussion in today's program about relevant Indian experience will be important feedback for us, and I am sure that this program will be successful in sharing the experience. Thank you.
The next speaker we have is former Ambassador of India to Nepal, Mr. K.V. Rajan. He'll be talking about
discussion. I'm particularly privileged to be in this session along with the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, who is a deeply respected, very senior political leader, and who knows probably a lot more about India's long journey to federalism than I do. But I will just say a few words, not as a constitutional expert, which I am not, but as a citizen of India, as a concerned citizen and as a friend of Nepal, and in a sense as a global citizen too, because these are issues which concern all of us. The first point that I would like to make is that federalism is like a very fragile plant. It needs to be nurtured on a daily basis. This nourishment comes from political will, from trust, accommodation, sensitivity, understanding, and a genuine sense of equality and interdependence. It does not flow automatically from a map or even a constitution. It evolves over time. It can either blossom into a splendid, strong tree, or like the cabana, it can look nice from a distance, but it can be stunted if one side or the other, that is the center or the states or the units, act. And of course, there are some cases where a federation is even stillborn in spirit, if not in letter. Democracy and federalism, in my view, they have to mature together. They either swim together or they sink together. Most newly created federal setups recognize the importance of stability. The center has to hold, otherwise there's not much point in having an arrangement between the center and participating units. The unity of the whole has to be safeguarded against polarization. Disciplinary tendencies, which are natural in today's world, have to be contained, even as the constituent units must enjoy maximum possible autonomy and are encouraged to promote and assert their identity. In India's case, India's experience with federalism has, it must be admitted, been uneven and inconsistent. The Deputy Prime Minister spoke about India's long journey of 60 years and the fact that the federalism is still very much a work in progress. This is simple, and I just want to remind all of you, particularly the young members of the audience who may not really know this in any great depth, that when India became independent, the preoccupations with safeguarding internal and external security were very serious. We had partition with all the attendant bloodshed and the huge migration of people from one side to another. We had the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. We had the immense task of trying to negotiate with more than 500 princely states left from the British days in order to persuade them to join the Indian Union. And all this naturally led to a revision of the earlier ideas about federalism, which were somewhat idealistic, because going right back to the Cripps mission and then the state cabinet mission plan that was set up by the British, the earlier idea was that this would be a very loose federation in which the central government would just occupy itself with foreign affairs and defense and so on, and the states would be very much more autonomous as in a classic federal situation. But all this was changed because of the great tragedies that unfolded on the eve of and immediately after partition. And after that, everyone, even those who used to endorse the idea of a very liberal federal dispensation, they actually began to shift their focus on security. For example, Kripalani, way back in 1946, November, said that centralization, more than is absolutely necessary, is inimical to liberty. He was very much a proponent of federalism. Provinces in free India, he had said, shall have the maximum autonomy consistent with external and internal security. But after partition, you know, Kripalani and others like Patel, who were for federalism, actually ignored the advice and aspirations of Gandhiji. Gandhiji favored village-based federalism. Nehru, in fact, was more inclined towards a unitary state. But by the time the second report of the Union Powers Committee came out, the emphasis had shifted to the following sentence, which reflects this change of emphasis. It would be injurious to the interests of the country to provide for a weak central authority which would be incapable of ensuring peace, of coordinating matters of common concern, and for speaking effectively for the whole country in the international space. This, to my mind, reflected very much Nehru's vision of an India which was not just at peace with itself, a good, peaceful federation, but an India which could play a role on the international stage. So you can note how the objective of the federal dispensation had been revised by the time people started discussing it. We were talking not only of security, which was the original preoccupation, but of the need for India to speak effectively for the whole country. And when Ambedkar, for example, who was a great proponent of federalism also, was tasked with giving his memorable speeches in the assembly, he too was defending the idea of a more unitary kind of state. He said, you know, India, when the constitution was drafted, he said India is a unitary as well as a federal state. In normal times, he said it would be a federal state. In a situation of war, it would be unitary. So people began to talk about the constitution being amphibian, both unitary and federal. The constitution being pragmatic, or they talked about a quasi-federation. But it was very clear that the framers of the Indian constitution were not talking about the country as a sum of its different parts, but as a single whole. It was an indestructible union of states which were not necessarily indestructible. So there was ultimately a healthy compromise. It was India, that is Bharat, as I think Ambedkar said, is a union of states. And he said it is a union, it is not a federation, because it is not the states who have agreed to form the union. It is a union who have decided that these would be the states which would be part of it. So it was a unitary state, by and large, with federal characteristics. This debate was a very passionate one and a very long one. But it was clear that in the end, most of the members of the Constituent Assembly, and in fact even the country, was reconciled to the idea of India being strong and secure from internal and external threats, and also the desire to have units in the federation who could not create problems for India, for example, by threatening to secede one day. Secession was ruled out. So it was not like many other federations where states, the units have a right to secede, as in the US, for example, or even in Canada. I remember when we were posted in Paris, when General de Gaulle went to Canada on his first visit, he went to Quebec, French-speaking part of Canada, and he said, "We, the Quebec League, may free Quebec live forever." And there was a huge hangama on this, and Canada nearly broke off relations with France and so on, because in Quebec, these aspirations were suddenly sort of fueled because the French president had urged the Quebecois to strike for living as a free entity, as it were. So it is interesting that the constitution, the rights of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, minorities, etc., it did not fix, as it were. Although the rights of the states and the rights of the centre can be decided by the courts, by the Supreme Court in particular, and the Supreme Court has done that many times. It is not the Constitution which gives this particular right. It is in India very easy to redraw the boundaries of states under Article 3 of the Constitution. A state can be eliminated completely also by a simple majority of Parliament. Way back in 1953, Andhra Pradesh was formed out of Madras state following a fast and to death by a leader from Andhra Pradesh on linguistic grounds, and this was followed in 3 years' time by the States Reorganization Act 1956, based on the fundamental principle of language. So Nehru, in his wisdom, along with other leaders, felt that language is such a strong expression of identity, and the languages of India are so rich, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Marathi, etc., that you have to give them a certain space of their own. And there was a certain widespread support for this idea, along with a lot of concern that this would open up the Pandora's box. Where would you draw the line? Because immediately these states were announced on linguistic lines, other entities began to insist that they should also have the same freedom, they should have the same right. Vidarbha was there, and the agitation for Telangana started even then, because the people in Andhra Pradesh said that all of us don't subscribe to Telugu. We have Urdu and Telugu. So there was a separate sort of agitation for Telangana, which was finally resolved only the other day, when Telangana was formed, but not because of decision taken by the Andhra Pradesh Assembly. It was really the central authority which decided, and Parliament which approved of it. So many states have been created. We've had since then Jharkhand, Uttaranchal, Chhattisgarh, etc., and today Golkhaland, Vidarbha, etc. are still there waiting for a chance to be recognized. Now, the point is that when this slight tension goes on between the centre and the states, it is inevitable that one side or the other feels that it is not being treated fairly. And this is particularly true when you have what can be called an asymmetrical federation, because in India, the federation is not symmetrical. There are differences between the rights of the centre and the rights of the states, and between the individual states themselves. So there is a constant toing and froing going on, and all kinds of structures have been thought of in order to give enough space to various voices and various demands that are being made from time to time. And to some extent, all this has worked, because what has happened happily is that, in a sense, while we started off as a largely unitary state, we have come a full circle since then, and today once again the states have begun to assert themselves, because after 1967, once the Congress party lost its overwhelming majority in the centre and the states, there was no option but to cohabit between the central the party and the centre and the parties and the states. And the states began to assert themselves more and more. And by the 90s, you had regional parties in power. You had Lalu Prasad Yadav, later on you had Mayawati, you had a lot of regional parties coming to power, and a lot of marginalized people who used to consider themselves to be marginalized, discriminated against, who were now very much part of the power structure. So the centre could not pretend that all these changes were not taking place, and a Sarkaria Commission was set up to look into the issues between centre and the states. The states had already gone to the court several times complaining about the treatment they were getting from the centre. Usually the courts in earlier years used to give their judgment on the side of the unitary bias of the constitution, saying that this was the purpose of the constitution. But later they began to look into the intentions of central governments when, for example, they were dismissing state governments. And they looked into whether it was bona fide or mala fide. And the Sarkaria Commission basically said, over-centralization leads to high blood pressure at the center and anemia at the periphery. And this began to be recognized as something which was bad for the country. And now, today, in the early years when Nehru was riding very high in the center, he was a hero for the masses, for the whole country, etc. The Congress party was in power in all the states. Even if there was a federal setup, in theory, there was no need to actually activate it. Because he would write letters regularly to all the state chief ministers, telling them what was going on in India and the world. He would consult them, and his word was basically law. Afterwards, it was very difficult for the centre to manage the states in the same way. And today's situation is that the very healthy competition, because now it is the market which decides which way the state is going to go. 2 or 3 things have happened. One is that every time there's an investment conference, for example, the other day the Chief Minister of Rajasthan was telling us that in one conference where there were 7 chief ministers trying to attract investors, one chief minister stood up and said, look, please come to my state because my doors are open. The second chief minister said, he says his doors are open, my doors are open, my windows are also open, please come to my state. The third chief minister said, they are saying that the doors and windows are open, my heart is open, so please come to my state. So this is a very interesting new development. The states are now competing with each other very aggressively. And this idea of cooperative federalism, which had been there all along as a subconscious factor but was never activated, today it is a reality. The centre and the states are actually interdependent. And Mr. Modi, after he became Prime Minister, has done several things, I think, to advance this thesis. The other day he was in China. He took with him chief ministers, and for the first time in the history of India, there is a forum that has been set up between the provinces in China and the states in India. Because Mr. Modi says that India cannot grow unless the states grow, and most of the development has to come from the states. Similarly, he has now thought of getting rid of the Planning Commission, and there is a new institution that has come up in which the states are equal partners. They no longer have to go with a begging bowl to the Planning Commission saying, please give us this ground, this, that ground. Thirdly, the taxes are being devolved in such a way that a large percentage of tax revenue is going back to the states. The other day, the coal auctions that took place brought in hundreds of crores of rupees, but that is not being kept by the centre to distribute to the states. That is going back to the states from where the coal was being mined. So not only are the states going to get more money without having to depend on the centre, the states are also going to be free to spend the money in the way they want. Now, it is going to take a long time before, as I said, democracies and federalism have to mature together. So it will take time before states really are able to utilize the powers that they have. But the days when the centre could dictate to the states are now, I think, happily over. Emergency provisions are probably going to be used very, very, very rarely. And the whole discourse now is how to give federalism more teeth. And of course there are all kinds of problems because every state has its own jealous sort of commitment to its identity. In Maharashtra, there will be an important party which says if you are not born of Maharashtra, Marathi Manus, if you are not a Marathi Manus, then you should not get jobs, etc. In Tamil Nadu, you have other kinds of problems. But I think ultimately these factors will be rendered more and more irrelevant, and what you will have is a country where the states at the center will be equal partners trying to develop the country in a way which will really respond to the needs of the people. I would like to stop here, but later on there is a chance that we have that kind of discussion. Thank you.
Pointed out how Indian state evolved in the process of federalism and how the great leader like Gandhi, Nehru and Ambedkar played a leading role in shaping the Indian federal structures. And he also pointed out the challenges that Indian state faces. I'd also like to point out a few more examples that the local states in India are also pressurizing the center in shaping the foreign policy. Like in 2003, how Manmohan Singh was pressurized not to go to Sri Lanka to attend the Commonwealth meeting summit. Similarly, similar pressure was from West Bengal on Manmohan Singh. Similar example came from Nitish Kumar, where he was asking state not to dictate the revenue policy on the state. So there are a few examples how the local states are pressurizing the center in foreign policy and other different decision-making process. May I now request General Ashok Mehta to say his words.
Thank you very much. I was in the process of thanking Sunilji for inviting me for this seminar, this conference. His institution has a very interesting name, Ideas, spelt differently. I am a friend of Nepal, and I am not a Modi lobbyist. Please, I would like to express my grave sadness on the earthquake that this country has had to suffer. But at the same time, I would like to congratulate Nepal for finally entering the last lap of forming a constitution. So I think this is great credit to the government, great credit to the people of Nepal, great credit to the political parties for finally being able to get an agreed constitution, which will be finalized, I hope, in the days to come. Now, being a military man, I'm going to carry out a minor coup with the help, with the permission of the organizers, and not speak on federalism. The simple truth is, I don't know anything about federalism. But what little I do know, I will apply, because one element that is missing, I think, from the federal character or the consideration is the security aspects. And they have taken issues of identity, they have taken issues of economic viability, resources, but I do not think that enough attention has been paid, which I'm sure will be paid, on the security aspects. And as Mr. Rajan said, that internal and external security are extremely important in the case of any country, and so therefore that particular aspect I will cover. My theme is basically to speak about the post-Modi India-Nepal relations, and because there has been a landmark shift, almost a tectonic shift in India-Nepal relations since Mr. Modi came into power, and that's not something that I am saying, it's something that Nepalis have said to me over the course of the last year and a half. Now, the question is that how do I see this relationship developing? Because I don't believe one man can transform relationship. And therefore, I do understand, and this is where I think that, and I believe that India-Nepal relationships pre-Modi have been stable, or at the strategic level, the relationship has been stable. But there has been turbulence at the tactical level. And that tactical level, one example can be 1988-89 period, or the period between 2008-9 until 2012, when there was political instability. So barring these two periods of tactical turbulence, there has been strategic stability in relations between India and Nepal. Now I want to look back, because if you look at post-Modi relations, you also want to look back, and as somebody who has travelled in Nepal for, since 1959, Nepal ko 16 saal, and I want to just give you a few vignettes of what Nepal appeared to be to me at that time. And I have recalled 3 anecdotes of what Nepal was in 1959. The first anecdote is about when I was in Barpak, which is your epicenter of the earthquake. And I remember that when we walked up into and stayed the night in Barpak, we had in those days, if there is anybody of that vintage here, there used to be a battery operated radio, not transistors, and this battery operated radio had a green light. And in this village, late at night, while we were covered with blankets, a couple of women came up and virtually snatched our blankets, very friendly snatching. And when we switched on the radio, there was people speaking from the radio. And one of the women said, "Abhay, manchi bole cha." And the other one said, "Tara isko eta aankha cha." You know, the Murphy radio had one green light. So that is one anecdote. The second anecdote is about the same period when I was somewhere near Jumle Pani. And I had climbed the Gadi there, and from Jumle Pani you can see the lights of Balrampur in India. And an old man who was smoking a cigarette, which was injurious to his health at that time, came up to me and said, and I was a colonel those days, he said to me, कि साहब भारतले धेरै अन्याय गरेछ अनि के अन्याय गरेको हो भने डाँडा काँडा नेपाललाई छोड्दियो समय फाँट इन्डियाले आफूले राखेछ. And now these are not made up stories. So there is this perception of India being unfair to Nepal. There is this perception of Nepal living in a different world. And yet, when you meet some of these budos, Bhupu Sainiks, what do they say? They say, Hamro Bharat. This is what they used to say then, in 16 saal, this is what they say today. And they also say कि भारत भएन भने हामी जिउन सक्दैन. अब यो मैले बनाएको कुरा होइन, कानले सुनेको हो, मुखले बोलिदियो. So this is a very facile perhaps representation, but I just thought that let me tell you what I have seen and what I have seen since. Now, if you look at the overall relations, I would say that the single most important feature in this is the geostrategic importance of Nepal. In 1919, a British Foreign and Commonwealth Office document had noted that Nepal is in a position to exercise powerful influence in India's internal stability, and if it were to become disaffected, the anarchy would spill over. We saw that when the Maoist revolution took place. Almost 5 million people came over into India. The second is that in 1975 we did an exercise, a scientific exercise, which was called Exercise Tribhuvan. This was done as a non-official exercise in India, where I was the convener of this. And what did this document, finally Exercise Tribhuvan, say? It said that the Himalayan divide is India's security frontier, and Nepal is the strategic gateway to the heart of India's Indo-Gangetic plains. Now, if you just picture a map, then you will be able to appreciate the importance of how India looks at Nepal's centrality to its security matrix. By the way, this report, Exercise Tribhuvan, way back in 1975, also said, and Mr. Chair, if I have your permission, I would like to quote from it. This report said that the real threat to Nepal was internal from disaffection against monarchy. If King Birendra failed to democratize, he would meet the same fate as the Shah of Iran. This report was done in 1975. We made some predictions about the Maoist insurgency in 1975, which, if anybody is interested, I would be happy to share it. But I stay with the importance, how important Nepal is for India, by another story which General S.K. Sinha told me when he was the ambassador here in the early 90s. When King Birendra, late King Birendra, said to him that, look, India doesn't consider Nepal very important because we don't figure in any discussions or any great security discourse. And General Sinha told me that he told His Majesty, then Majesty the King, Hajur Hoina, this is not true. Nepal is the Tauko, is the brain, it's the head of this body, which is the Indian subcontinent. So everything, the importance of Nepal lies in that. And finally, Mr. Modi, when he became the Prime Minister, the first country that he chose, that he wanted to visit, was Nepal. Although he did not visit Nepal, as the first country he went to Bhutan. And the reason why he went to Bhutan was because, again, of the security considerations and the centrality of the Himalayan area. So, the point I'm making is that for India, Nepal is the most important country. There is absolutely no doubt. It may not reflect in so many words, it may not reflect in discourses, but that is a fact. And this fact was established not in 1975 by Exercise Tribhuvan or by Mr. Nehru in 1950. It's a fact of life. It's a geostrategic reality that we have to accept. And if I can quickly move on to the unique and special relationship between India and Nepal, this is based on the open border, the people to people, the kinship and culture, and the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. The 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship has 4 components. It has a component of sovereignty, independence. That's the first thing in that treaty. The second is on security. The third is on economic relations. And the fourth is on people to people relations. I think this is the fundamental prop on which, and the open border on which the India-Nepal relations are based. And the strategic connection of the Gurkha soldiers who sacrificed their lives for the freedom and independence of India. I mean, there can be no greater testimony of Nepal's contribution to this relationship. The economic bonding is another feature of the special relationship. The Indian rupee and the Nepali rupee, the tie-up. This is quite unique. And finally, Nepal-India relations, as somebody said, are so comprehensive that they cannot be compared with any other 2 countries. I mean, if somebody can stand up here or later and tell me if they're an example of any other 2 countries who have this kind of a relationship, please let me know. Because this relation touches in every way the relationship between India and Nepal. Now, what do Nepalis, how does Nepal's psyche work towards India? Historically, Nepal has been sandwiched between China and India. And the great Raja, the founder, the consolidator of Nepal, Prithvi Narayan Shah, had said कि नेपाल दुईटा ढुङ्गाको बीचमा एउटा तरुल छ. That guides the foreign policy to this date of Nepal's leadership. But Nepal has gravitated towards, willy-nilly, towards a country which is stronger. And the state of India-Nepal relations have been determined by the desire and the intent of Nepal to create strategic space for itself to exercise that autonomy by using a third country. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And the sovereignty-based nationalism has given rise frequently to anti-India sentiment. And this was the highest after the Maoists came into power. In fact, since then, there has been a rise of this anti-India sentiment. There are misperceptions, there are misconceptions, but there are real grievances like issues like Kalapani, Susta. These issues have been there for ages. I mean, I read in the paper today that the Maowadi group, I think the Baidya group, some group is going to hoist a flag in Kalapani. When I came here in 1999 with Mr. Jaswant Singh, Mr. Bamdev Gautam now the Deputy Prime Minister, had gone to Kalapani. So hoisting a flag in Kalapani now, hoisting a flag in Kalapani then, I think will not settle the matter. This matter needs to be discussed between the 2 countries. Now, what did Sanju Upadhyaya in his book Raj Lives On has said that India and Nepal, he writes, whoever rules Nepal, and I'm not saying this, is Sanju Upadhyaya saying this, whoever rules Nepal has to get India's blessing and keep its legitimate security concerns in mind. Mr. C.K. Lal, a noted journalist, I don't know if my friend C.K. Lal is here, said in 2013, it is hard to imagine any country in the world so totally dependent on the other, in brackets India, for its survival. Mr. C.K. Lal. But the economist in the same year said that, and it wrote in the end, India's influence is much the greater. Its spies have been active in splitting parties it dislikes and in ferrying favored leaders to go to Delhi to shop and be flattered by big wigs. This is the economist, so you get a contrast. And finally, a senior army general of the Nepal army told me that anti-India sentiment, he says, nonsense. When the People's War was being waged, people evacuated to India, not to Kathmandu or elsewhere. Gurkha ex-servicemen are the right testimony. Now, what are India's concerns? Some of these are the spillover effect, that is, of instability. That we saw that happen in the Maoist war. The second would be the Chinese creep in Nepal southwards into Tarai. The presence of Pakistani ISI, their agents. I mean, I recall I was here in 1993 and I busted with the help of the Nepal police an operation that was being carried out by the ISI, Operation Tufel. Operation in 1993, and the gentleman, well, he's not a gentleman, an ISI Major Asim Bajwa was present here. Major Asim Bajwa today is Major General Asim Bajwa. He is the head of the ISPR, Inter-Services Public Relations in Pakistan. They were carrying out that. And then we have this thing about fake currency. We have, with the help of the Nepali police, excellent security cooperation now with the Nepali police and the Nepali security authorities. We have busted many rings, and we have been able to, with the help of the Nepalis, capture many terrorist leaders who are operating in India. And finally, we are obviously can never forget the IC 814 hijack from Kathmandu to Kandahar. And I will never forget, and if my friend K.V. Rajan will forgive me, I will quote an instance that led following the 814 hijack. When now you travel from Kathmandu on Indian Airlines flight, there is a security check that is done. Now, if you have bothered to look, the platform on which you stand is 2 feet above the ground, because the Nepalese were sensitive. They said, this is our sovereignty, therefore this check will not be done on Nepalese soil. So the check is now being done 2 feet above Nepalese soil. So we respect Nepal's sovereignty and independence. Now, India's strategic assets in Nepal, Nepali citizens in the Indian security forces, the ex-servicemen, the Nepalese diaspora in India, and the military-to-military relations. I don't think we have any example between two countries of army-to-army relations of such a high order as is the case between India and Nepal. This is one of the great, you saw what happened during the earthquake. The assistance provided by the government of India, but notably by the Indian military, yes, there were certain infirmities in the use of the insensitivity of the media, but overall that illustrates this Gurkha bonding and the Nepal army and the Indian army. And finally, I would like to mention about Narendra Modi, the game changer. I think in 17 minutes of his speech in the parliament, he captured the hearts and minds. I remember I met Ran Bahadur Shah in Dang, and he said to me, 75% of India-Nepal problems are over. After his speech, he said the right thing, his oratory, the Modi wave I saw all along. And I have to tell you that I was attending a seminar in Nepal Ganj, and an Indian, whose name will not be mentioned, was sitting next to me, and he said, he whispered into my ears, he said, you watch it. In 6 months, the Modi wave will dissipate. And that did not happen. In fact, what Ambassador Ranjit Ray said at that conference in Nepal Ganj, and which is true, that what could not be done in 60 years was done in 4 months. And I have a full list which I will not regurgitate here on what has happened post-Modi, what positive developments have taken place in terms of power development, power trade authority, in terms of connectivity, in terms of people to people, in terms of health. And let me come to my my last bit on the security ramifications of the 6-state solution. I mean, the security aspects have to be factored. The internal security and the external security have to be considered. The contiguity factors, all the 6 states, according to current demarcation, they touch India, 5 touch China. But India has a much longer border with Nepal, or Nepal has a much longer border with India than is the case. So I am sure that when the details of the center-state relations are worked out, this would be factored, the security, internal and external security.